The Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union was signed on August the 23rd, 1939, partitioning Poland, Eastern Europe, and shocking the world. Why exactly? After all, there'd been cynical cooperation between Germany and Russia for decades. So what was different this time? Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
Germany's foreign minister arrives in Moscow, where he and his Soviet counterpart on August 23, 1939, signed a non-aggression treaty. Under what has become known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the two agreed to take no military action against each other for the next 10 years. Stalin viewed the deal as a way of avoiding war with Germany, while giving him time to build up the Soviet military. A secret protocol carved up Poland, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Romania into German and Soviet spheres of influence. Hitler used the pact to make sure Germany was able to invade Poland unopposed the following month. The pact fell apart in 1941 when Nazi forces invaded the Soviet Union, forcing Stalin to seek military help. While the Soviet Union, Britain and the US operated under different political systems, the threat of a common enemy in Nazi Germany brought the Allies together. The Big Three met in 1943 in Tehran to explore what an Allied victory might look like, and again in Yalta in the Crimea in 1945. There, agreement was reached on the division of Germany into occupation zones, and that the Baltic states of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia would become part of the USSR. Poland posed problems for the Big Three though. As Soviet forces fought towards Germany, they established a communist government in Lublin, despite there being a Polish government in exile in London. In 1945, they met again in Potsdam. The US and Britain were antagonized because the part of Germany east of the rivers Oder and Nisa, occupied by Soviet forces, was being run by the pro-communist Polish government, exactly what Churchill and Roosevelt had refused at Yalta. Roosevelt did not tell Stalin about the nature of the recently developed atomic bomb. Days later, America dropped 2 bombs on Japan with devastating effects. As the world entered the nuclear age, the Cold War began between East and West. Stalin established an iron grip across much of Eastern and Central Europe. However, on August 23, 1989, half a century on from the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the world witnessed one of the largest peaceful demonstrations. The Baltic Way brought together 2 million people, joining hands to form a human chain spanning 690 kilometers across Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. In the wake of the 1989 revolutions, August 23rd became an official Remembrance Day dedicated to the victims of Stalinism and Nazism.
My guest today is Alina Nowobilska, a Polish historian based here in Warsaw. Welcome to the programme once more.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really great to come back and chat with you again.
Wonderful. We're going to be discussing the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact today. We're going to try and set it into some sort of historical context. In 1939, it was announced to the world, big shock. Was it as shocking given Russo-German cooperation? But how did this particular pact, non-aggression pact, come about in the 1920s and 30s? Was it in that sort of era?
So the 1920s, you've got to remember, we have the Polish Bolshevik War, right? And the Bolshevik ideology was to sweep communism all the way up to Germany, because that's where all the industry was, and that's what's so important about Germany itself. And this sort of thing stays in the air a little bit, and Germany is very well aware of that. This cooperation, it's continued. You see it throughout history. You see this cooperation constantly. German,
partitions of Poland.
Exactly. And the thing is that Russia believes most of Poland is theirs, and Germany believes most of Poland is theirs. And the West doesn't seem to understand this idea of changing of borders. Poland didn't exist for 123 years. You know, Warsaw was under Russian occupation for 123 years, up until a couple of years during the First World War. And in a way, it's not really surprising that they do make a pact. But it also is at the same time because the two ideologies are very different. In 1939, they're very, very different. I don't know, should we delve into it?
I mean, is this because the communists and the fellow travellers in the West were shocked because of an alliance with the fascists, and the fascists were shocked because of their alliance with their sworn enemy, the communists? Was it on that level?
It is, exactly. So the communist newspapers in Britain are writing saying, what is wrong with Stalin? Why is he doing this? Well, it works for both of them, really, at the end of the day. Hitler in the 1930s was proclaiming, the Jews, the communists, they're evil, they're horrible, they're going to dominate and take over the world. And on the flip side, Stalin was doing the same thing. They were taking the mick out of Hitler. He's just a joke. So you've got these two people trying to, rip each other's throats out, yet they've somehow put a pact together. It doesn't make sense, does it?
So what made sense in what they were trying to do, not just in Poland, of course, but in the rest of Eastern Europe? Well, this big land grab, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly. This is what they want to do. The Soviets, they believe Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, it all belongs to them. Most of Poland also belongs to them. And Hitler wanted to expand eastwards. He needed Lebensraum, so living room for the rest of for the Germans. We've got German people living in Poland at the time in the 1930s. They need to expand. Warsaw should be theirs. And I still myself don't quite understand the ideology behind all of this.
But what tangible benefits, apart from the territorial gains and the territorial delineation of who gets what were the benefits for Germany on the one hand and the Soviet Union on the other?
Well, Germany doesn't have any resources, so it needs Russia's resources, basically. So oil and things like that to be able to, rearm itself, really. So Russia does provide that at the end of the day. On the other hand, Germany wants to take this land, but there's an issue here. If, without Russia's cooperation, if they invade Poland, there is a possibility they'll have to fight Russia too. And they don't want to do that because this will deplete their sources completely. So with the cooperation of Russia, or the Soviet Union, it's easy because they both take the land and everything's peaceful and easy.
Yes, and get ready for the next round.
Exactly, and this pact is realistically the beginning of the Second World War because literally a few days later, that's when Germany invades Poland.
And we need to bear in mind it wasn't just a pact for 1939 and the invasion of Poland,
no.
But 1940s, the Baltics, and then this went on for almost half of the duration of the Second World War, didn't it? It stopped when Hitler, in fact, then rescinded the pact and invaded.
It's 22 months, from my calculations, my mathematical calculations are right, it's about 22 months. This pact's supposed to last for 10 years. So if another country invades either Germany or Russia, they come to their aid. But if they get involved with another country, so for example, if Russia takes over the Baltics, Germany doesn't get involved. It's their sort of area, their domination of what they're dealing with. And that's what Soviet Union does. It takes Poland in 1939 and the 1940s, absorbs the Baltic states and attempts to take Finland as well.
And this kind of cooperation, this secret protocol tradition, if you like, we see this in the secret protocols of the partition documents, that we don't mention Poland ever again. We wipe out its memory. It seems to be one of these very brutal things that Germany in its iterations and Russia in its iterations seem to do.
Well, nobody knows about this secret protocol up until 1945. Russia in itself, So the Russians admitted it in 1989 and the Allies found out about it in 1945.
And so is it something, this particular pact, the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, is it something that all parties want to forget, both Russia and Germany and also the Western allies? It's a cauldron of cynicism for everybody?
No, it's I love that question. That's probably going to be my favourite question, because we get to delve into modern day politics, where currently Russia is proclaiming that it never happened. And
so how does that spin this particular?
Well, if they do slightly admit that it happened, it's because they had nobody else to make a pact with. They were all alone. Poor Soviet Union was all by itself and undefensible and all on its own. And the only person that reached out their hands to them was Germany, and that's the only reason. And this is being repeated constantly. And the worst thing is about this, it's being repeated in the West. And you see it on social media, where people are believing in this propaganda, and they're like, oh, but the Soviet Union, Russia, they didn't have a choice. And it's really dangerous, because people are forgetting what the secret protocol was about.
Yes.
It's about wiping out Poland.
How does German historiography treat the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact?
I think Germany tries to wipe out that the Nazis even existed, in my opinion.
It's all the Nazis' fault.
Exactly, and this is one of my biggest pet peeves, is using the word Nazis, because it's a word that was created, obviously it was created in the 1930s, but it was also created to separate the German nation from Nazis during late 1940s, 1950s. It was all the Nazis' fault. It wasn't. There were ordinary Germans also participating in all of this, and people seem to forget that. And that is really important that we remember. If you want to use Nazi Germany, great, I will take that, but I will not take using just the word Nazi.
Yes. How does the pact seems to echo not just for Poland but for the rest of Eastern Europe, the Baltics in particular? How was that commemorated in the communist era in the 1980s, 1990s, when the Baltic states in particular were kind of just emerging from this occupation?
I don't want to be mean to Poland, because obviously I'm Polish myself, but we seem to sit in our own little bubble.
Yes.
That, we are the only ones who were affected by the secret protocol.
Bessarabia down in the south.
Exactly, and this is it. We are the ones who are we were the worst ones that were affected. We seem to forget the Baltic states also were involved, and we can see that now, especially in modern day, how affected they are with what's happening in Ukraine. But in 1989, I think one of the most beautiful, peaceful protests happened, and that was in the Baltic states, where you had about 2 million people from all three states, where they held hands, and it was about 600 kilometers of a distance going from city to city. And if I'm not mistaken, it's one of the biggest peaceful protests ever in the world. And they wanted their freedom. Poland got its freedom by 1989, but the Baltic states still didn't have it, and they wanted it, and they did. They got it in the following year, 1990.
How is that affecting the mentality of the Baltics, the victims of the pact? Is it still the idea of, well, we had our history taken from us, our people were deported, executed, all that sort of stuff? Is that still vivid it is in Poland, of course, but is it still as vivid in the Baltic states and in places like Romania where they were victims as well?
I was about to ask that question back to you. Do we see that in Poland? Yes, we do. So obviously it's going to be more or less the same. I was listening to a podcast a couple of days ago about a woman, a Lithuanian woman, who was really paranoid about the Russians now invading Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. And this is something that we will still see. We'll still see that fear. It doesn't matter if it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now.
There were echoes. It sounds very brutal to say this, about echoes of the Russo-German tradition of policing Eastern Europe. Echoes of that in the responses to the Nord Stream gas pipeline. There are tweets from high-ups in Poland saying, well, this Nord Stream deal, 2006, it's another Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. It's so embedded that the Russo-German cooperation is going to bode ill, not just for Poland, but for the rest of Europe.
It is. And this is the problem we're still going to face 10, 20, 30 years now. Even though Putin is probably one of the most evil human beings on the planet right now, I believe, and I really hope the Germans don't come after me for saying this, but I do believe their cooperation is still going to continue. Even if Russia takes over Ukraine, even if Russia decides to take the Baltic states, that cooperation will still continue. Is this still based on raw materials for Germany and some sort of technological exchange from Germany to Russia? Is that still one of the key relationship? I don't know, that could be one of the reasons, but I also think it's an ingrained friendship through time. You know, we spoke about this earlier, where it is a continuous, repetitive cooperation. It doesn't matter if they have opposing political opinions, they're still going to cooperate. It's a bit like, for example, Poland going hand in hand with the Czech Republic. For example, you know, brothers, but from, you know, as you say, brother from another mother, that's what we're like. You know, it is that friendship, that key way of holding hand in hand. And I think Russia and Germany are exactly like that. This will continue even 100, 200 years from now.
How does Poland then get out of this? One of the quotes I always remember from when I was a kid, reading about a book from by a German author about the Warsaw Uprising, and the introduction was, if Poland doesn't make itself a symbol of industrial and military power, it's always going to be subservient either to Berlin or Moscow. Is that this brutal lesson that Poland needs to?
I mean, if we could move, if we could literally pick ourselves up and move, that would be...
Tow it over into the Mediterranean.
Exactly, that would be so much better. We can get better weather, but realistically we can't do that. So I think the best way is to become a superpower, and Poland is slowly on its way. The industry is going up. We have Poles coming back from Britain, America and Canada. The job market is on the way up. However much, you know, we seem to put Poland down nowadays, I don't think we should, because it is on its way. It may not be a superpower like America, but I think we will be able to stabilise ourselves enough to be independent away from both.
Yes, because it's in one of these bad neighbourhoods in Europe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Alina Nowobilska, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much.
So that's all we have time for. Do join us next time for How We Got Here.